So the last speaker then for this afternoon, waiting patiently, is my old colleague Frank Kane. You still with us, Frank?
I'm still here.
Okay, and Frank has been working in the aquaculture team for best part of 20 years, and he's now graduated to IMTA, Multi-Trophic Aquaculture. So Frank, you might talk to us a little bit about that, and just also contribute as regards how you think that yourself and the folks in Foras can contribute to this network. Thanks. Over to you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Miho. I'll be fairly quick. I think the timetable has changed a little bit. I have 20 slides, most of them will be less than a minute, so I'll be well under 20. To begin with, I was at Law Mara last year. I was in Portlamara in Kilkern, and it was really a celebration of all things the marine. It was really a great day, but it's great to see it continuing online. I was looking at the blurb relating to Law Mara for 2020 here, and you described the things like, sorry, I'll just rearrange my screen a little bit because talked about exploring the breadth of the economy and the opportunities for the Gaeltacht, how we can use traditional and new technologies to create business opportunities, and the advantage and opportunities from the marine sector. And from my point of view, IMTA seems to be an ideal solution to all of these. And it's a topic, I think, that can provide advantage to both the traditional and the large fish farms. I'm going to give a general overview of IMTA, but I'll start just introduce myself first. I currently, as Michal said, I work in the Marine Institute in the aquaculture section. I've been there since 2002. I'm not loving the 30-year thing in my started description, but it's pretty accurate. I've been in the fish farming sector since the Italian 90s, somebody said last night, working in salmon farming in Killary Harbour and Berkshire Bay, and then worked a little while with the mussels in Killary and the oysters in Carlingford. I joined the Marine Institute in 2002 in the aquaculture section, specifically on sea lice monitoring and sea lice monitoring program. And more recently have...
Frank, you might up your voice a little bit, so just pitch it more to the mic. Thanks.
Okay. And more recently have ventured into the aquaculture research side, where we're looking at particularly IMTA in our Lehana Pool site out in Berkshire Bay, and what that might offer for the industry. So that's what I'm going to talk about IMTA, what it is and what it might offer for the industry. For those who aren't familiar, I'm guessing a lot of you are, but there are probably some who aren't. IMTA or IMTA stands for, it means Integrated Multi-Trophic Aquaculture. And it describes a concept in aquaculture rather than a methodology. It's not new as such. This has been going on in various forms over the millennia. We had people growing fish in paddy fields, this kind of stuff. But the acronym IMTA was coined in 2004 by Thierry Chopin, who is one of the founders and the key sort of guru on this topic. Current practices in aquaculture generally are single species, one farm, which is known monoculture. And then if you add numerous species to that, you can go to polyculture. But IMTA is a very specific type of polyculture. It requires 2 or more species, and they have to be complementary to each other in some way or other. So there are 3 elements in it: the integrated, the multi-trophic, and the aquaculture. Aquaculture bit, we're all very familiar with it. This is going for organisms at sea. There's lots of different varieties. But I'll talk about the other 2 elements specifically, the multi-trophic. And when we talk about trophic, we're literally talking about different levels in the food chain. So at the bottom, we have the primary producers, the seaweeds, the microalgae, which are growing. These feed the shellfish, the bivalves, which again feed up the chain to the sort of carnivores and up to the larger fish, such as salmon and perch, and those which we're going to be talking about. So that's what we talk about. The elements have to be from different trophic levels to create the benefit. Just to be very clear on this, the top of the food chain, we're not talking about farming dolphins, okay? Let's get that over now. Then the third element of it is the integrated element. And this is the sort of key to the whole lot. The species farmed have to link to each other in some way, and they have to serve complementary functions within the ecosystem. So the idea is that the organic or inorganic waste from the fish, one species, actually serves as a nutritional input for the others. So we're taking the waste, which is currently a problem in aquaculture, and creating a product with that to use to grow other species. we're reducing and eliminating the waste and having a new co-product or byproduct, as we're talking about. So we're all sort of familiar with the current way fish farms work. You either have fish pens with lots of fish in it, or oyster trestles with oysters in it. A sort of typical IMTA setup would be a combination of those, and the ones we're probably more familiar with are fish pens with salmon. Adjacent to those, you would be growing mussels or maybe oysters or scallops, which are filtering from the water and absorbing the nutrients. And again, adjacent to that, you would have the seaweeds, which are taking out the inorganic components and using these to grow. And they all benefit from each other in this natural ecosystem on the site. So that's what we talk about a typical IMTA site. But in the talk today, and I sort of see IMTA as one of these discussion points for the cluster as it goes along, are where can IMTA go? What's less typical? So we can move on a little bit. We can add things like sea cucumbers on the seabed, or ragworms, which are, you know, eating the organic waste that feeds to the bottom. You can have urchins, which are growing on or eating the stuff that grows on the pins and stuff. In Lehana Pool, within the impact project, one of the species we've been looking at is lobster. Now, lobster isn't an ideal farm species because has such a long life cycle, but the concept we were looking at was to grow juvenile lobster, to put them into individual pens and hang them off the cages. So you're putting them out at stage 3 or 4, which is probably a centimeter in size. They'll grow within their own units on the pen, and actually at that size, they'll feed naturally from the wild, from the particulate matter that comes from the pens or is in the water naturally. And you can grow them up to 2 or 3 centimeters. And if you actually take those and then release them for restocking, you've given the natural population an advantage in the survival of fish, and there's quite a bigger population there for the traditional lobster fishermen to catch on to fish from. So that's one sort of less typical model of the IMTA process, which has both a community advantage more so than a commercial advantage. Other ones we're looking at is, we're in the impact project, we're working with Key Water Fisheries up in Sligo, and they're growing perch along with plants in the water. So they have this split pond system whereby we'd say 1/4 of the pond has the fish in it, and the other 3/4 or more of the pond has plants growing it, which are using the nutrients released by the fish to grow. And this has actually worked really well for them, and it's progressed on to the Aquamona project, which are looking at a large-scale version of this up in Mount Lucas in Kildare, is it, or Westmeath. So those are elements of where IMTA could work in a less typical way. And then we'll move on a little bit even more, because so far we've looked at the small scale within your farm site, but actually IMTA could work on a much broader scale. It could work on the whole bay scale we talk about. The question is, do the nitrogen molecules released by the fish, do those same ones have to be extracted by your seaweed or shellfish, or are we looking at an overall input and extraction balance for the area? They do this in China. There's quite a lot of this going on, but we have areas in Ireland where we could consider, have we got IMTA setups already? This is a photo actually of Kilmacillogue Bay in Kinmare, and you can see we have fish pens growing in among the mussels. And I know anecdotally they talk that they actually do help the mussels to grow bigger and more meaty within the bay. But we have a number of bays in Ireland where this concept is already happening. Mulroy Bay, we have salmon pens, we have scallops, and we have seaweed all going on within the bay. Our question is, how do we apply this, and really there's also challenges for people like us in the Marine Institute and the general regulators as to how do we take account of this within the overall regulation of the industry. And then we have sort of, as the concept of IMTA progressed, people began to talk about much bigger ideas. And one of the more recent ones, which is probably quite out on the horizon, but it's heading there too, is the idea of carbon market or nutrient trading or nutrient credits as such. So we're moving again from the site, the nutrient balance within the site, to a much larger scale. can a large-scale seaweed farm further up the coast be used to reduce the impacts of, from one bay to another, that kind of idea. And this is an idea for basically us as regulators to ponder and think how we can do this, how we can consider how IMTA might progress in the future, and will we be able to regulate that? Will we be ready to regulate it when it happens? But at the minute, we're still very much early, probably in the typical IMTA setup, and there's a lot of research going on to that. So I sort of just mentioned within the Marine Institute, we're involved in 2 quite large projects on IMTA. I'm working in the Impact project, which is looking at developing the concept, coming up with ideas and technologies for IMTA using intensive monitoring and intelligent management systems on how to do this. And most recently, we started an Astral project, which is looking to develop new value chains and new species for IMTA. They're based on our lab, our IMTA lab, as it's called, within the Astral project out in Lehanapool in Cashel, in Burtaboy Bay there. So that work is ongoing. But IMTA really is about the combination of species and how they work well together. So the research has to focus on that and answer those questions. It's dependent on the number of factors, your bay, your economic factors, your winds and currents, but also the social factors, the experience of the farmers themselves, and the regulatory factors involved. So for a successful IMTA, the combination of these factors will lead to your choice of what's going to work within your bay. But IMTA, that's what it is, and it brings a lot of benefits to the industry, I think, that we really need to be considering working on. Obviously, there's a reduction in the ecological impact. We're converting waste into a useful product. We're replacing the dilution of waste principle with extraction and conversion and creating a new product from it. We're moving more from the linear model to the more to a circular whole ecosystem approach model. So the linear model of food, feed your fish, input, grow fish, the fish waste goes into the sea and falls to the bottom, straight line. Whereas we're creating more circularity by reusing the product. IMTA provides a waste reduction service for the industry. Within the guys in Keywater use that split pond, and the water that they actually come out at the end of the pond is perfect. They can recycling again, it's pristine, or we put it back into the river and actually cleaner than when they take it out. Seaweed itself is a new product that can be used within fish feed, creating full circularity within the product. IMTA is more sustainable, more environmentally friendly, therefore it improves the whole social perception of aquaculture. It's a way to make people understand and trust the concept more. And then there's also, it has advantages. Ireland sort of led the way with the organic standards within salmon farming a number of years ago, and that was really successful. IMTA, I think, offers the next step in the marketing. We have a whole new product with a whole new set of standards. This cutting edge marketing. It makes it more generally acceptable for the general public and politically, which I think is a huge benefit for the industry. IMTA helps to decouple economic growth from resource use, which is one of the key objectives of the current EU Green Deal, which is coming along the way. So this is a way to help answer the requirements that the EU might have from us in the future. We talked about that lobster stocking idea. IMTA can bring different community benefits depending on how it's used. The optimization of space. Currently you have your 30-hectare site with a number of pens in it, but actually by adding different species, seaweed, you're actually creating more product, reducing your impact all within that same zone, that same area. So you're using the space more efficiently and effectively. There's commercial benefits from having a second product on your site, and also alternative cash flows and more resilience within your business by having diversity. There are a number of challenges. They're largely economic and regulatory. And the economic one is significant, and probably why IMTA is still a concept rather than reality, in that the imbalance between the trophic layers. If you're selling salmon, then you're making much more money than if you're selling seaweed. And the challenge of adding those to your site doesn't necessarily make economic sense to do that. So that's one of the challenges to be addressed. But also then there is the complexity of having your farm, the cost involved in adding the different species. And if you're a salmon farmer, you're familiar with your system. Adding new systems is going to bring a challenge and a risk. There's significant regulatory challenges. The regulators are going to have to be able to facilitate this more complex model. We're going to have to be able to figure out how to license multi-species sites and allow the flexibility to farm these species collectively. We're going to have the ability to allow multiple operators work on the same site. We sort of talk about addressing one of the challenges of if you're a salmon farmer, it probably makes more sense to actually bring in somebody to farm your seaweed rather than do it yourself, because bring in somebody who knows what they're doing rather than have to learn the methods yourself. We'll have to consider the ecosystem beyond the farm. So we look at where does the waste go, and that's where we're talking managing on a bay or area level. The waste is not confined within the coordinates of the site. And yeah, IMTA concept can be extended within very large ecosystems. So regulators have to look at how to manage the waste within this larger picture. Things like nutrient trading come up as an idea. The future of IMTA, I believe as more people adopt it, the expertise will grow, the technologies will improve, and we'll learn how to use it and how to do it better. The simple model of a single farmer producing a single species can be expanded. Farmers can look at working together and cooperatively within a site. The fish might be managed by one company, the seaweed might be managed by another, and your shellfish by others, all to mutually beneficial arrangements. It allows for those benefits we said, but it also allows for shared infrastructure between the sites, shared boats, that kind of extra benefits. The economic element may not be the key reason for farms to adapt, and it probably won't. I think we have to look at IMTA with greater than economic eyes. There is an intrinsic benefit in being more sustainable and reducing your environmental impact, and it offers societal, political, and regulatory benefits. So regulation may actually, particularly EU regulation, the blue growth, the Green Deal may actually push us towards zero impact aquaculture, and IMTA is going to help push us in that direction. So sort of to sum up, the move to IMTA will be a slow process as people learn the process and technologies. Having multiple products is useful. It gives diversity, it creates revenue streams, it adds value more than the commercial value, and has significant benefits for the system. It reduces environmental impact, it increases sustainability and circularity, and is a more efficient use of space. And it gives a boost to consumer perception of the product and the societal and political license to operate. And these are key benefits, not just to IMTA, but to aquaculture in general. So I'll leave it with that. Thank you very much, guys. I can't hear you, Miguel.
Thanks, Frank. One thing that just strikes me when you think of the various talks today, that we're talking about several ideas and research concepts that are a bit more long-term. Just wanted to respond maybe to this. Park Namara itself, 5-year, 10-year time horizon. Val was talking about renewable energy, 10 to 20-year time horizon. Similarly with standards for seaweed, although that could be shorter, and so on. And IMTA is a long-term time horizon. I'm just wondering, is there some way, from your experience so far, of shortening that? And just to throw in a specific question, you are familiar, I'd say, Frank, with the general concept for Park Namara, and it does include some investment opportunities both for finfish, recirculating on land, and also shellfish potentially, and even seaweed. Is there any way of kind of looking at Park Namara from an IMTA sort of lab point of view? Have you thought about doing that at all, and does it make sense?
It very much does. I think Park Namara is a key tool to sort of developing IMTA and the research community. Within the talk there, I gave sort of 4 levels of IMTA, the typical one, which is on your site, and then we moved up to the Bay Area management. I actually think that the first level on your site and even working up to bays is probably something we can do right now. It's something we can do quite soon or quite quickly if the industry decides to go that direction. There are ideas like working with co-ops to do your sort of lobster farming, bringing seaweed farming on board and within your site. The real challenges here are probably to get the larger industry interested, and also for the regulator to figure out how they're going to do this. And I think we do have to, working in the mainstream, I think the regulator has to make sure we're not the ones that are holding this back. From a Park Namara point of view, I think having a research hub, a research area like Park Namara, particularly working with the marine site in Lehenapool, it offers quite a good way to answer industry questions. And the idea of a cluster I got from there is whereby the industry comes to the researchers and comes to the regulators and says, this is our problem, find answers for us. And that's where I see we fitting in, and that's where I see Park Namara being that vehicle to answer those questions as we go along.
Okay. A comment then in the question, maybe you were talking about the challenge of regulators. In fairness, I think our regulators have enough problems with single species aquaculture, Frank. Never mind going on to multi-species. You know, it would be difficult to persuade some of our colleagues to get their head around it. How do you see us getting over that challenge?
How do I, if I could answer that, yeah, I agree that there is a huge challenge in just regulating aquaculture as it is. I don't necessarily see the whole IMTA element as adding a huge level to that challenge if we can just face it from the point of view of the impacts of aquaculture. What are they, and is this adding to them, or is this reducing the impacts? Is this as regulators, I think our job is to protect the environment and ensure that businesses operate sustainably. And I think if we actually can just use the small scale level of simple questions like, is this better or worse for the environment or for the sustainability? Yeah. That's an easy way to go.
Yeah, okay. We're going to wrap up, folks, in a minute or two, and I'm going to ask our colleague Mark Vita from Foras just to come in again and just what did we learn today and how are we doing. But just my own response, just to what Frank has presented there, is that I would agree with you. There are two ways in which IMTA can link in with what we're talking about here today. To some extent, they're both what I would call conceptual. They're, in a way, paper-based or research-based. One of them is just to look at the proposed layout for Park Namara over a 5 to 10 year horizon and see what are the inputs and outputs that can actually, in some way or another, benefit each other between finfish recirculation systems, possibly shellfish, possibly seaweed, and vice versa, and just see what's there as a paper exercise. And then the second thing is looking at it from a bay point of view, was this thing of nutrient balance. You mentioned that, Frank, which is definitely one where, for sure, if we're able to say in the west of Ireland, we have bays that are producing X tons of finfish, for the sake of argument, what does that convert into N, and Y tons of seaweed, and what does that then, sequester in terms of N, is to produce mass balance for bays where we can see. So the idea of carbon credits from existing seaweed to aquaculture, in other words, some form of trading within that. And I was at a seminar organised by Foras on Monday this week where Catherine McManus, who may be on the call today from MOE, was saying that that company globally is already in the business of trying to basically capture carbon credits and trade carbon credits to, in some way or another, into the future, make their salmon aquaculture more sustainable. So for sure, in an Irish context, given that we have significant seaweed assets, what does that turn into in terms of nutrient sequestration, matching that up with our production? So I can see there's a lot of research potential, Frank, in what you're saying, without physically having to go out and literally grow the fish in all cases. You want to comment on that?
I agree. This is an area that we are looking at currently within the Lehenapool site and within the projects we're involved in. And that there is also quite a significant amount of work out there on this within other research institutes. So yeah, the answers are there, and it's something we need to do from an Irish.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, Gurmil Mahagat, Frank, back to your day job in Ormore Red